Hey, this is Dr. Gary Sprouse, the Less Stressed Doc, and I'm welcoming you to the Happiness Highway podcast. And this is a podcast where we're trying to get you into your happy place, trying to tell you what it is, and then what keeps you from being in there and getting rid of all that crap so you can enjoy the rest of your life living in your happy place forever. And I want you to welcome to my lovely wife, Terry, my co-host.
Hello.
Yeah, welcome back. Yeah,
Hello. Thank you.
Good to be here.
Drive on Happiness Highway.
So today we're going to have a guest. His name is Collis. And he's written, 4 books now?
Yes.
Yeah, and his last one just came out. It's The Gift is the Present. And I like the title. I'm intrigued to hear more about this. So tell us about what's going on with you.
Let's start at the beginning to try and align ourselves in happiness and see if we can agree on this foundation. That pretty much every human being has the same desired destination. We're trying to get to peace of mind, a calm, steady state of, you could call, happiness. We work 50 years at a job to do what? To retire. So we can do what? Slow down, become calm, still, and happy. So if we can sort of begin from, we all have that destination, then the question becomes, why isn't everybody happy?
Yeah, there you go. That's what I'm trying to answer with my book, right?
Right. What's in the way? So I come from this position of you are a story, the two of you. You are each an individual story, and you are storytellers. If I met you for the first time in person, I would say, nice to meet you, Gary. Tell me about yourself. And you would begin telling me your story. Our stories are created mostly from our childhood. That's the beginning, the foundation blocks. And in that beginning, almost everyone receives some sort of trauma. I would even say that birth itself is the initial trauma into life. And so we are given the baggage to carry. And for me, it was, physical and psychological abuse as a child. Being told for years I was no good. I wasn't smart enough. I wasn't capable. I was a failure. I got an F on every test paper. The other kids didn't, so I knew something was wrong with me.
So you literally got F's on your paper?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that imprints on my story that it's true. I'm not good enough. I then carry that story the next 50 years living up to it. Self-sabotage when I start to do something successful, because you have to sabotage yourself to be the story that you believe you are. You live up to your identity, your image of yourself.
Yes, exactly.
All people carry some sort of baggage in their life. Some are affected strongly, some are not. For me, the pain got to a place where drugs and alcohol became the medication to get away from the pain. Although I say my first addiction, and I think most people's first addiction, is blame. We want to blame other people for our problem, blame another situation, blame the government, blame the environment, blame politics. Always blame something to keep the pain off of us because we're not taking responsibility for ourselves. And for me, that's what all addiction is keeping the responsibility away. That keeps the pain away. Because if I don't have to face myself, my true self, and what I am responsible for, I can mask it with a medication. And so alcohol is a great medication because it works so quickly. And it instantly gives you this satisfaction, the bump, the quick high of, a relief. Of course, as it grows, it comes back to bite you.
So then you're going to like my theory of addiction. I've come to the conclusion that the term addiction is a part of the problem. Like when you say to somebody you're an addict, that's an automatic, that means you're bad and you're less of a person or whatever. To me, to get rid of the stigma of addiction, we actually have to get rid of the term. And so the term that I use is, I use a stress reducer loop. You're giving a beautiful description of what I talk about, which is people are under stress, whatever the stress may be, and it could be from the past, it could be from the present, it could be about them worrying about the future, but they're under a lot of stress. So we all have different mechanisms we use to get rid of our stress. So some people exercise, some people go to church, some people drink alcohol. But when the stress reducer, the thing you pick to reduce your stress, starts causing stress, Now you're in a stress reducer loop. So now the more stress, the more you do your stress reducer, the more stress, and you end up in this loop. And to get out of that, you can change. You can go, okay, I'm not going to do that anymore. But if you didn't do something to help get rid of the stress, it's either going to come back or it's going to come back in a different form. So instead of drinking, now you're smoking, or instead of smoking, now you're eating too much, or instead of eating too much, now you're exercising too much, or you're doing something too much. And it's like, if you don't get rid of whatever was causing the stresses, you're just going to end up back in the same problem.
That's right. And that's where I think I always had a problem with like a 12-step program, AA, because it's really a forcing addiction response. It's not creating that health, it's trying to force it. So you need someone there to support you when you're still falling down. You always need something external to get you there, when the reality is it only can come from the internal. You have to really deal with yourself. You can't fix an addiction. You can only change yourself.
So AA has its benefits and its side effects, right? One of the benefits is that, yes, you have to work on yourself, but to do it in a group setting where somebody's already been through it before makes it a whole lot easier for you to go through it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm not saying it's worthless. I'm saying there are some basic fundamentals that I think are a problem, in that we're using an external force to try and change ourselves. And this really doesn't work. You can look at 100 years of therapy has really been a failure because it's an external force. 100 years of personal development and success industry, has been pretty much a failure because it's an external force. The only force that works is when you come to terms with the reason for your behavior. And this is where, as you just mentioned, the addiction often, the healing often fails. You keep returning to it because you're not dealing with the cause. And so people can even have a thought addiction, where they have a negative thought and they loop into it, and it gets worse and worse and they spiral down. That's a form of addiction to negative thinking. And lots of people live in that, and that's from this baggage, from the story mind that you identify with.
You just hit a chord with my wife. She's over here going,
I said, ooh.
So what were you thinking?
About the addiction to negative thought.
Yeah.
That is very profound.
Yeah, but see, I don't think that would be the addiction. To me, that is the problem. That's the source of the stress. The thought is the source of the stress. What you do about it is something else. Like what you talked about with some childhood trauma. It's like, if I looked at your life right now, I'd say, well, it's not that bad, right? If you have 10 coping skills, but 8 of them are being used to deal with stuff from the past, that means you only have 2 for right now. So if something comes up, like by the 3rd, you're already overwhelmed, even though your life right now is okay, because a lot of your coping was being done with the 80% from the past. And so that's where the difficulty is. So to me, that recurrent thought is the stress and what you do about it. So one of the reasons that you were drinking was to get rid of that thought, which you worked really well, right? Like my brother told me this, he had problems with alcohol himself. And he said, I didn't go to a bar to have fun. He said, I went there to get numb. Like I didn't want to feel. That's what I went there for. And that's a whole different purpose to go to a bar and drink alcohol, right?
But I will associate fun to being numb.
Oh, well, yeah, right, because the stress reducers work. They just cause more stress because you wake up with a hangover and you threw up on yourself and your wife's leaving you and your family doesn't like you anymore, right? So it's like, it works, it does what it's supposed to, which is why people keep doing it. It just causes all these other problems.
Yeah, and when I say the thought can be an addiction, it's because the thought is giving you a benefit. It is proving your story. So that's why you'll go back to a negative thought, because it reinforces who you are. It's like me as a kid believing I'm no good and then proving it with my actions.
All right, I'm writing this down because that's good stuff.
I'm supporting myself. So to me, there's a benefit to losing. There's a benefit to the negativity because it's saying, yep, that's who you are. It's those moments you do something wrong. I drop a mug and it smashes on the floor. And the voice in my head goes, you idiot. That's just like you. What a dumbass. Well, what's that voice? That voice is reinforcing who I really think I am from my story. That's the struggle we're trying to constantly mask through an outside addiction. or an outside source of a goal. Get the car, get the house, find the mate. These things will get us the life we want and maybe happiness, always covering the problem. And this is why we don't reach it. We think we are. 90% of people never reach their goals. Why? Because the outside influence doesn't work until you meet with your story and understand what it's about. It's yesterday. It doesn't exist anymore. It is just a belief that you hold. So for me, I'm listening to a podcast one day, and the man on the podcast is talking about consciousness, and he says this one line, "Show me yesterday." Blew my world apart. Totally blew my world apart. Because I live in yesterday. Almost everyone does. We carry the imagination of tomorrow and the memory of yesterday linked together right now as we're living. And so everything we do is based on our memory. When this guy said, "Show me yesterday," I thought to myself, I can't go to the cupboard and pull yesterday out and go, "Look, doctor, here's yesterday. What do you think?" It's not a thing. It's only a belief and a memory. I don't have to believe it. That's the message came to me. And at the same time, I got unbelievably lucky. I woke up with cancer one morning.
That's lucky.
Yeah. And over the next 12 months, I lost my wife, I lost my house, I lost my business, lost my family. And there I was alone, alcoholic, and suicidal. The absolute best year of my life because it opened me up. It made me see the story. It made me understand I was living in this memory and pain that isn't real. It doesn't exist. I can't show you my emotional baggage. We say it as a metaphor for this pain and struggle, but it doesn't exist. It's only my identification with it, and I don't have to. And that whole thing told me none of this is real. I'm living an illusion in my mind. So why don't I just create the life I want? Why don't I choose to be happy now? Why do I have to wait?
So one of the things that I'd gotten trained in is hypnosis and this program called neuro-linguistic programming. Now, one of the things they talk about is reframing, which is kind of what you're talking about, which is like, I had this past. I don't want to forget that I had a past. I mean, these things happened. I mean, it's not that they didn't happen. My interpretation of what they mean is what I work with. I go, let's reframe what that meant. Like when you drop a coffee mug, does that really mean you're an idiot? No, it's the interpretation of what happened that gets you into trouble. What you're talking about, that interpretation, that's what's under your control.
Absolutely. A trauma. If your trauma is an event, that happened, that's reality. You don't say it didn't happen, but it's all about your perceived meaning that you put on that event that carries it for as long as you carry it.
One of the patients that I work with had come to me, and I'd been seeing her for 20 years. She had panic attacks, and we used medications, things like that. So when we finally did neuro-linguistic programming, what happened was she'd gotten beat up by a patient. And the story that she told was, I was at work, this guy went crazy, he started beating me up, and she was in pain, and she felt isolated, and she was defeated, and she was a victim, and she carried that for 20 years. And when we did the neuro-linguistic programming, under hypnosis, it sort of turns out some of the internal noise so you can see things better. So then she told this whole new story, which is she got beat up and she was laying on the floor and she had passed out, and she woke up and it turned out there was another person in the room. And so this crazy guy had started beating that guy up too. And so she had to make the decision, do I stay on the floor and just pretend to be dead, or do I get up and try to help that other guy? And so she decides to get up and she distracts him and she calls the police and everybody survives, right? So at the end of our session, I said to her, so you're a hero? And she looked at me like, what are you talking about? And I go, well, you're a hero. You risked your life to help somebody else. That makes you a hero. And just as you're saying, like her story had been, I was a victim, I was in pain, it was bad, right? There was no control. When she changed the story and now she's the hero of the story, you could see her whole body language change. And she went back to her regular therapist that she was seeing, and the therapist was like, okay, what did you do? Because you look all different now. And like all the reasons that she had been doing medications and drinking, all these different things that she had done, now she didn't need them anymore because her story changed.
And that's the exact framing I do about alcohol. I quit just like that because I didn't need it anymore. It didn't have a purpose. As soon as my mind got to it had no purpose, there was no reason to do it because all the downside was obvious. There was no upside because there was no purpose. So what you just said about that reframing that woman goes through, it only takes something very small as long as the belief gets in. I got to the edge of suicide. And at that moment, I'm talking to a friend and I'm expressing, I'm completely lost in life. I'm a failure. I've gone through all this disaster, cancer, losing everything in my life. Everything that is me has been destroyed. I'm weak. I can't do it. And he looks at me and says, hold it. You just went in 1 year in a pandemic. You went through cancer, lost your wife, your house, your business, your family. You're an alcoholic and you're still alive. And you don't think you're strong? And that was like, maybe I'm not as weak as I think I am. That began that train of thought.